a big thing that men have to face is this whole I need to be rock hard all the time and at full mast, and that's the only time I'm going to feel pleasure. That's another mind thing that we have to face as men is like, dude, you can feel a lot of pleasure and not be fully aroused in that way.
Hey everyone, welcome back. You are listening to the Pelvic Pulse podcast. And today I'm sitting with Ean Wood. So at 13 years old, that's crazy. Ian's father introduced him to the Mankind Project organization and the world of personal development, which I think is so cool that your dad did that. For the last 12 years, Ian has supported and listened to men as they share their sexual secrets. He has produced documentaries, published articles in 5 countries in 3 different languages, has delivered a TEDx speech, and is the host of a podcast titled Men and Sex. So today, we are going to be talking about the men's sexual experience and their pelvic health and what that really means and what are these secrets, and I want to know everything. And just, I guess, a little extra background for the audience. It was just so cool, and I don't know if I told you this in the moment, but Ian and I recently met at a Friendsgiving through a mutual friend, Frank. Shout out to Frank.
Frank.
Yeah. At the Cosmic Community Friendsgiving. And you guys met at a Sacred Sons retreat held in Washington, and did I tell you that I was supposed to potentially go to that?
No.
Okay. So actually, it's so funny. The friend that I was just recording with, Uni, shout out Uni, she asked me if I wanted to go to that retreat for her birthday month. And
Whoa.
for whatever reason, it just like wasn't going to be in timing alignment and all the things. So we didn't end up going. But how funny would it have been if we had all met up there, not knowing? Because I remember Frank came or went before he left for that. He was just calling it like a camping trip. And then I don't know if that's throwing him under the bus or not. But then when he came back, he was like, "Oh my God, Brittney, I need to tell you about this experience. It's like just discovering the masculine, the feminine. It was so crazy. Like you would love it and all this stuff." So, anyways, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. I love the when the stars align and things happen in a magic way like that.
Yeah, no, it feels definitely um, very cosmic.
Very, very
Yeah,
cosmic.
yeah. So, okay. I'm so curious, maybe just for more understanding of your background, what this
Yeah.
actually was like being brought into men's work at 13 years old. What was that like?
That's the funny thing about the human experience is we don't get to know anything other than our experience.
Right.
And for me, it was just my life. It was just this thing that my dad did. And my dad was so different than everyone else that it was kind of like this different thing, this different way that my dad experienced life. And I can't imagine what I was experiencing subconsciously and what I was taking in. And on top of me being introduced to that, we had the Northwest Sweat Lodge, like the community sweat lodge on my dad's property. So
Oh,
the men
wow.
would come and sit in ceremony and sweat and be intentional and meet in groups. So I was seeing and being exposed to things that are very abnormal in the world of men for sure. And that's a big part of why I'm on the journey that I'm on is I looked back at my life and part of the ingredient that I bring in purpose is the life that the creator, God, spirit, whatever you want to say, has laid before my feet. And I see, okay, yeah, men's work has been around me since I was a kid. I can see that God intended me to walk this path because honestly, for a long time, I was like so over men and I just wanted to work with women because women were
Mm,
showing up to do the work. And I'm so grateful that I looked at my purpose and the path, what was laid before me, because I've been so strongly directed back to working specifically with men, which has brought me to this avenue of sexuality. And it's so cosmically trippy to be here.
That's super, super interesting. And you know what? As you were speaking and saying, like, this is the only thing you know, you don't know anything different. And when we were off recording and talking about what we might want to touch on, I was just thinking about how cool would it be to hear about what it would be like to introduce, say, like sacred sexuality or just, it, more of an understanding of your own embodiment as a young boy. Because a lot of what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to change the path for a lot of young women and hopefully women that are, say, my age and beyond. But part of it I feel like comes with um, more education and exposing. I don't like the word exposing, but sharing with girls about a way to embrace their puberty in a more empowered way and what that actually looks like. And part of me is like, what's so funny is once you offer that to someone, you don't know what their life would be like not having had that. And so you don't really know what kind of impact you're making on someone. I want like because I wonder if your dad can speak to this. It's like he only knew to show it to you because maybe of what he's experienced in the past and you can't, take that away and be like, I wonder what kind of impact this ended up making on this person." But you being here, I think is speaking to that impact of what he shared with you and brought you into so early on in your life. And so
Absolutely. I mean, it's so fun because we get to share that together as adults. We
mm,
we do retreats together. We work with people together. So it's I tell him it's karmically him experiencing himself.
whoa,
I'm like,
whoa,
you are reaping the rewards of yourself through every action and interaction that we have together. It's kind of trippy.
that's so cool to think about. So your dad does men's work too. Like
Yeah,
he
yeah. We
facilitates and you do too.
Yeah, he's not as engaged in men's work as I am. He's feeling passionate about joining me on the new Sacred Sons journey that I'm on,
Mm,
and he's coming out up back into the energy of that. But what he's really passionate about the retreats that we do that get rid of gender, where gender isn't something that matters, and that's where his passion lies and has lied for him and me together ever since we've run our own things together. It's never been, I don't think we've ever run just a men's thing together. It's always been
mm,
all are welcome.
gotcha. Super interesting. Okay. Well, I do want to hear about the men's work though that you're doing.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And like, why are men telling you all these secrets? Like, what's going on with men's sexuality? And I guess let's start with that question. We can go deeper in.
Absolutely. Well, a big part of my path has been first experiencing containers, groups, experiences that other people were leading and I was getting to be a staff member of. Like I was getting to be a curator of, but I wasn't the organizer. So that's what got me into the world and into different experiences where it was like, okay, we're going to talk about sexuality and we're going to talk about, sexual shadow. We're going to talk about these things that aren't okay to talk about. So at first it was other people like organizing those experiences and me just being a staff, but it was over and over and over every time. The energy was it's so insane. I mean, I staffed another one of these weekends a month ago and it was the same energy where it's
Mm,
just like an explosion, and it's palpable to see. It's like the men's postures change. There can be like slumped down and it's like they sit a little bit higher. They're looking at each other. There's almost this realization that for a moment, this cloud has lifted of there's something wrong with me. I'm bad. I'm gross. I'm whatever, that lifts for a moment because we're speaking about it as a group. And it took me, I mean, as I said, I've had this experience for over a decade, and it took many other experiences and pieces coming together that I was just like, okay, this needs more attention. This needs more room. And what I hear in most of the stories, in most of the secrets, once again, the common expression being, I've never told this to anyone in my life. That's what I hear every time. I've never told this to anyone in my life. In the podcast, in the training that I run, it's the most common phrase that I hear is like, wow. And it's like this interesting, very subtle realization sometimes of like, huh, I've never told that to anyone in my life. And it's like, do you know how big that is for us to have all these things that we don't talk about with anyone? Once again, we can't like measure the difference, but from my own experience personally and working with men, women, everyone, it's like when we have those things inside of us that we don't share with anyone, there's something incredibly limiting and disempowering about that.
Mhm.
So when these men get to share for the first time, I swear I can see it in them. I swear I can feel it in them. It's there, and there's something about opening the throat and speaking it into reality, into a space outside of the mind that is fascinating.
Yeah. So, I guess, is there a difference then in, holding these spaces and being a staff member, facilitator, space holder for these, like, maybe it sounds like big group experiences, right? And all of a sudden these men are sitting up taller. Are they having those same kind of experiences after sharing, say, a secret that they've held that maybe they didn't even realize it was a secret that they were subconsciously holding back about their sexual habits or their sexuality or just their expression, I guess, in general? Like, are they all of a sudden, okay, I'm liberated now, here I am?
Well, and I'll say, you know, like everything in this realm, in that sharing and the posture changing and the things that can be seen and felt, there is a normal state of being for those men. So when that space comes to a close, when they go into the next thing,
Mm.
it's like there is this repetition that I believe is needed. And that's, why I'm so passionate about normalizing the conversation and why I do trainings that are longer. It's just to get more, it's like getting the repetitions and it's getting in new neural pathways that it's okay for me to talk about this and facing all, so much of the biggest thing that men face is fear of homosexuality.
Mm.
To talk about sex, to talk about an erection, to talk about their body with another man is this like deep layer of that is homosexual, that is gay. Like it is such an interesting fear to feel in the collective consciousness of men.
Hmm. You're feeling that fear and you're naming that, or are they able to name that in the moments that they're talking or sharing about their bodies, their sex?
Yeah, it's something that's mentioned, not like,
Mm.
"Oh, I was afraid to do that because of this." But
Mm-hmm.
it's like this little whisper everywhere. It's like this little kind of and one of the stories that I hear the most from men that they're not talked about is either sexual trauma that happened to them
Mm.
or a sexual experience that they had with a friend when they were going through puberty.
Mm.
Um, and it's something that I just sense in men around masculinity too.
Mm.
There's
Mm-hmm.
like these interesting crossovers of what a masculine man is and isn't.
Yeah. I'm curious about that. And I guess like more in the sense of how do they envision a masculine man expressing his sexuality?
Oh my
Say
gosh.
say I know, I mean, I know. I kinda know where you're going. Maybe. I
Yeah.
have an idea, but, specifically, I guess, just to kind of narrow the scenarios down a bit
Yeah.
because there
Yeah,
can
yeah,
be
yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of scenarios, but in a heterosexual relationship,
Right.
what do they think that a guy is supposed to do? And does that change at each maybe phase of their life where, you're young and in your 20s or, you're just starting out, maybe getting to know yourself at such a very young age and, you don't know any better.
I wish we could have like a poll
I know.
on the talk because I'm
Drop it in the
sure
comments.
I'm sure the heterosexual women could speak very highly of this, of what they experience in men.
Yeah,
And for me, in my own experience, when I hear men talk about it, it's once again this lack of information. And what
mhm,
I've come to realize is a disconnection between the genitals, the heart, and the mind.
preach. It's the
And
same thing for the women, by the way.
totally. And the big thing I see with men is this kind of duality that is soft men, is what I call soft men, and then hard men. So like the hardened men are the ones that have more so like closed off their hearts and shielded up and kind of gotten the machismo, and that's the way they are out in the world. They like pretend they're confident, but they're super insecure inside, and they have like the harshest inner critic, but they like, they're out there like posturing and, working hard to get the things, but inside they're like a little scared, timid boy, and they may not even be aware of it. And then the
Mhm.
other side is like the really soft side, which is like maybe they're raised more by the single mother. Dad wasn't home. Maybe dad was super hard. He was one of the hard men, and they like got picked on. And so they kind of collapsed and they got more of the soft side. And these two men they are gonna have different experiences of how they should show up, or how they relate to how they should show up. But the main things in what I see on Instagram, on social media, about sexuality, men that teach sexuality, the main things that it's about is lasting long,
Mm.
knowing all the tricks, how to get the woman to do this, how to get the woman to do this. I see the bodily
I
response.
know, I'm like, "Ugh."
Uh, so I'll give you, this is my perspective on experiencing men and being in this world for so long, especially heterosexual men. There is so much unaddressed mother wounds.
Mm,
It's insane. And it's a bunch of little boys wanting mommy's love and trying to be good enough.
and then seeking
And
that inside of a romantic sexual relationship and not actually addressing it within themselves or with the actual mother-son relationship.
and I'm just going to say it. I've never said this out loud. Your orgasm, speaking to women, your orgasm becomes mommy's approval and validation and love.
That lands. I'm not even
That
a man and that lands.
when you reach climax, for a brief moment, I am relieved and I get a hit of the medicine that is, I'm loved, I'm worthy, I'm valuable, I'm appreciated.
Hmm. But okay, so as the woman feeling this, like imagining myself as a person in a relationship with a man who feels my orgasm as that brand of medicine, I instantaneously feel pressure and Closure.
And this is why so many women feel pressure and closure in their intimate relationships. Because this is, I mean, so many men are like, nah, that ain't me. It's so subconscious. It's so shadow below your conscious awareness. It's not something you can just see. It's like takes
Right.
many scoops to look. And one of the things that is my theory why the mother wound is so strong and why we seek that love so innately is because the mother was the portal of separation.
Mm.
All separation came through the mother. Meaning, when we came into this world of duality from the world of unity, singularity, when we were not material, we were in the belly, we had all our needs met, we were not an ego, we were in wholeness. That separation. So to come back to singularity deep in the subconscious, like baby in mommy's belly,
Yeah.
the woman represents that portal.
Yeah. You're making me think of, because we talk about this a lot on the podcast, actually, more specifically this season, but the mother baby dyad and how important that is, and how, I mean, yeah, I think as people get older, they don't have they don't know what they don't know, and like the access to information is difficult to get, especially with the way that we're censored on social media and things like that, specifically related to sexuality. And if we kind of come back to that core wound, that mother wound, which I think inevitably begins in the womb, and then you look at the way that women are treated while pregnant and how they select to be treated even sometimes, um, and the way that birth is these days versus maybe how it was a long time ago. There's a lot of, I feel like the threads here are so interwoven. And I'd be curious to know what the correlation is or if there's causation. I don't know if you can prove it. And again, I'm not a research scientist. We talked about that a little bit before off mic, but how many men feel like whether or not they can know or name that they are working on a mother wound, and if that mother, how that mother experienced the birth of that son and what that relationship was like at birth through early postpartum and how much of an impact that could have been.
I mean, just being curious about that is life changing. To go ask your mom what she was experiencing in her life when you were in her belly, and then what she was experiencing at your birth is mind blowing.
Okay. I'm going to speak to my own personal wound here, which maybe it's a little raw, but I have written about it before and I've shared about it before um online and in this podcast. But for me specifically, realizing that the fear that my mom had when I was in her womb, because not just her own internal fear, like her first time giving birth or anything like that, but also because a doctor told her, your body, your pelvis is too small to birth a baby this size. We need to do a C-section. I think I was an emergency C-section. I can't remember exactly. I
Me
can
too.
ask her. But yeah, like, and you're familiar with craniosacral and somato-emotional release? Okay,
Yeah.
so I did my SER2 training this past summer, and I had an experience of not like being back in my mom's womb, but I could feel the energy of what that was like. And there was just this explicit feeling of fear of me, like I'm someone to be feared. I'm someone who could break and hurt my mom, and there is no acceptance of me coming through this way. It has to be another way. But as a baby, it's like you are perfectly innocent and just trying to survive, right? And so I had to have space to feel that in realizing, okay, my mom had a fear of me. And that feeling of disapproval or not feeling accepted has still kind of like popped through in weird threads. But in real life, in reality, my mom and I have done a lot, not even together, but I've done a lot of work on my own mother wound and I think it's just crazy how flipped over our relationship is in a good way now.
Mm,
I can talk to her for an hour, 2 hours, which couldn't do that even 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
mm.
So we're on the right track, but addressing the mother wound and doing it through, say, a variety of ways, including for me, it was like reclaiming my sexuality. And it's just interesting that it sounds like even though they might not know it or think that they need to do it, if men are struggling with their sexuality or struggling with knowing how to express it or connecting with it or how they feel that they can connect with their woman in a way that both of them get to feel the love that they need to feel, then maybe the mother wound is something to look at. I don't even know if that circled all the way through, but
Yeah, yeah. I think, well, why I'm so gung ho committed to this path in connection to, all these different pieces is in some interesting way, it all connects to how I relate with sexuality.
mhm,
It's like, especially for men, the main thing that I like to focus on with men is pieces around it's the place where the most shame exists because it's the most taboo, it's the most secretive, it's the most hidden, it's the least educated, it's all these things. And there's the most energy there. There's the most desire there. There's so much energy. I mean, there's 8 billion people on planet Earth. That is a representation of the energy that we're talking about.
yeah,
And whether a man whether he looks at his mother wound or he looks at his attachment styles or he looks at his insecurities and not feeling good enough. I mean, I'm sure the same is for women. There's so many strands to pull on when it comes to the relationship to sexuality. That's why it's so rich. It's just like go in, like quit trying to fix the sheetrock on the third floor, go down to the concrete and rebar in the ground and start working with the foundation of who you are and how you experience yourself in the world.
yeah, 100%. I'm even glad you called it rich because to me, when I allude to this pelvic work and pelvic health, it's root, it's sacral, it's solar plexus. It's just these like lower three chakras, right? And the sacral chakra being connected to sexuality, but also how could the root not be also, like, I believe, slightly tied to it. Sexual energy is creative energy. It's the ability to create and create resources, create money. Like it is all connected together. So, yeah, like you're saying, whether you look at your attachment, your mother wounds or father wounds, even, and or all this other stuff, um, I think really also, I'm glad you mentioned shame because that is super, super prevalent even in even in a woman's body and in a woman's way to expressing her sexuality. And
Totally.
yeah, I mean, I know
We're
that men are probably feeling that so differently.
I was gonna say we're in that together, you
Yeah.
know, like we're on this path together in facing that in different ways. And one of the ways that I think about it is, I always like to refer to the masculine energy as like the sun, the rays of the sun. That's a representation of yang energy. It's outward, it's active. You can even use the word penetrative.
Hmm.
And for men, that's the kind of energy that wants to move through these male bodies, outward, active, penetrative. That's the energy that wants to move through. But for most men, their foundation of relating with that energy is hiding. secrecy, lying, guilt, shame. Like, you shouldn't be doing that. If there's any connection to religion, it's literally you're going to go to hell for eternity. Like, what is bigger than that for the mind and body? And yet, still, there's this energy moving through. It's not going to, this mind is not going to stop the power of that creative energy, but it's going to sure distort it into really weird things. And I think this is why it's such a yo-yo in our reality, which is like it's the highest of highs in connection and it's the lowest and lows in disconnection, because
Yeah.
it's like that energy wants to be expressed, but there's all these weird filters and blockages and kinks and turns and twists that it has to move through to be expressed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally contortioned because of all these different layers. Whether and I think so I listened to one of your podcasts, Men and Sex, and it was about a man who was forced to watch porn as a teenager, or even maybe 10, I don't know, he was young. And I was curious as you were speaking, like how shame just kind of turns this energy into something completely distorted. And I wanted to be able to have you name maybe the ways that these kind of manifest so that men can who listen to this can hear it and be able to like make themselves aware if they're not yet aware.
Oh, we're going to go into your subject matter in some ways, in some ways,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
some ways. If a man wants to get curious, all he needs to do is look at the way he pleasures himself. That's it. Because he's going to be performative, he's going to show up different, he's going to be a different person in the way he shows up with another person. It's a whole different being that shows up. But if a man wants to be curious about what his relationship with sexuality is, as objectively as he can, to just look at the way he relates with pleasuring himself. And once again, this is one of those tricky things to look at because you only know what you know.
Mm.
So it takes like that objective perspective that is like, I do this for this long. This is what turns me on. This is what I watch. This is how often I orgasm. It's like really those just basic observations. And no matter how he shows up with a partner, how he shows up with himself is the foundation.
Ian, if you can take the him, he, himself, and just put the she, her, herself in there, it's the same fucking thing. It's the
Totally.
same thing.
Totally.
And something I'll like, I guess I just want to preface and say that I don't want to, I guess, add to any layers of shame.
1000%.
But I
Thousand
think
percent.
from a lens of curiosity as a practitioner and as a woman in a relationship with a man who has had other relationships with men who I mean, it breeds and pulls on my insecurities, I think for sure when I bring this up. But I've been in relationships with men before I was more in touch with my own sexuality and before I had actually processed a lot of my sexual shame because I grew up in a religious family. Dad was a
Mhm.
priest. Um yeah, men who used pictures like literally the most random thing, but like of course like Instagram models, porn, but like random pictures of girls on Pinterest that they screenshotted. Sports Illustrated magazines, even like, any kind of like artsy books. And it was just really fascinating to me, maybe more so in the last year or two, that I've been kind of questioning that to myself.
Oh,
And it's it's like, because I'm someone who doesn't want to I would never wanna shame someone for masturbating or exploring
no,
self-pleasure, right? Like, it
no.
is literally the pedestal I stand on. It is the soapbox I stand on. Please know yourself
Yeah.
and and experiment and see what your capacity is and see if you want that to grow or see if you want that to change. There's so many reasons I think to do it, right? Just for the fun of having a human body. But also, it's not just that you do it, it's a questioning of how. And if that is something that feels true for you and quote unquote right for you, how do you feel afterwards? Does it feel satisfying? Does it feel fulfilling? Does it feel life giving versus
Mm,
be feeling more shame or just like not satisfying? Like for women, I feel like maybe just to make an equivalent, and again, not to put shame on anyone who uses one, but because I still use one every once in a while. It's just another level and layer of, again, the physical experience. But if you're someone who, say, uses a vibrator every single time
totally,
and you get off in 5 minutes, are you satisfied? Just
totally,
curious. Just curious.
totally. Well, I'm glad you brought that forward. And it's just a tough space to navigate without triggering that.
Hmm.
And I'm the same way. Like, my whole goal is to alleviate shame. Like, that's my main target is acceptance of where a person is, acceptance of where they are, because people aren't conscious enough. People are not conscious enough to be where they are based upon conscious decisions.
Mm.
It's reactive, it's experiential, it's shaped from the time you were in the womb and exited, and the unique you and how you perceive reality and the experiences that were presented to you. That's why this conscious work is the key, is because all of it has been created unconsciously. And then I go, boom, where am I? How do I pleasure myself? What is that relationship I'm now looking for the first time? And that's how the shame gets activated, because now I'm finally looking. And then I go, oh wow. Oh, I didn't see that before. And that's why it's called shadow, is because parts of us are designed not to look at it, like to
Right.
protect us. And on top of it, we're navigating this tricky human being that the mind starts to weave together from experience, from the chemistry, from the observation, all these different experiences. It starts to weave its own unique relationship with arousal.
Mm.
Like, from the time we were kids, we started like rubbing things on our bodies, or like, doing these interesting things. We're like, wow, this feels really good. I don't even know I'm doing. But then mom or dad's like, that's disgusting. You shouldn't do that. Like, instantly our mind starts weaving together what arousal is in our bodies and in our minds.
Mm.
The tough thing that we're facing with adults is so many of them have shame woven so deeply into their arousal, they wouldn't even know what arousal was without shame. And so that's some of what we're navigating is, I mean, there are a lot of kinks that are based upon shame. There are a lot of
100%.
kinks that I wouldn't I wouldn't be surprised if on the other side, part of what they feel is just such deep shame for being sick or wrong or twisted or something, because that's what was woven in so early on.
I was watching Gossip Girl. I've been watching Gossip Girl. I don't know if you've ever seen it, probably not. But I'm finding it hilarious what they're writing into these high schoolers and they're in New York, whatever, so maybe they're, like, more adult than most high schoolers and they're with a lot of money, and one of the lines, oh my god, it was from Chuck, and he's like, shame turns me on," and it's like, "Oh my god, that fucker," like, and that's early on, his character early on, but I was, like, jaw dropped, like, just listening to the ways that like, yeah, what you're alluding to right now is yeah, shame can be a kink, it can be a turn on, and is that because it's so woven in from such a young age? Like, you kind of have to learn how to deal with it, essentially, when you do feel aroused, and so might as well play with it? Like, is that what the brain's doing to just con I guess, to protect you and integrate
It's
it? Like, is that's not even to me maybe a fully integrated thing.
no, I think it's just becomes, the familiar.
Mm,
It's like this chemistry, and if we think about arousal and its activation of the sympathetic nervous system, it's like, and then we think about that in stress and how they're so similar and how easy it is to mix stress chemistry with arousal chemistry. And then we start mixing in the beliefs, because shame is so perspective belief based. It's not reality based whatsoever. It's just perspective. I'm wrong. I'm gross. I'm bad. There's something wrong with me. It's all mind. So that
mhm,
mind starts getting in there with the stress chemistry, with the arousal, and it just starts to become normal. And then we become weirder and weirder because we get into the world of the internet. Then we start finding, oh, wow. Oh, I really like this twisted video. And like, all these weird things you can see is once again, this is why it's so important to take a pause and like look and accept where we are and go, I didn't get here through choice.
mm,
I didn't get here through choice until a person has done deep, deep, deep looking with curiosity over extended periods of time. It's never been from choice. It's been just this human sensory interesting thing that interacts with reality through sight, sound, taste, touch. Then the electricity goes through the body and the chemicals move through the bloodstream, and it's very much so just this automated thing. But then
mhm.
it's like, okay, here I am. Why do I like watching those videos? Why do I like to do this way? Not from a place of it being wrong. Once again, we're not bringing in wrongness. It's just curious of like, huh, I wonder what's got me to here.
Totally.
Do I want something different? Would I like, because I think that one of the biggest things that happens to us is we all get pigeonholed in such a limited way of relating with arousal
Mm,
and sexuality. It's like, I know this thing gets me off. And so I just do it over and over and over again. And it's like, we've lost that vibrancy in relationship to our own arousal.
right. So, I mean, you spoke of earlier by being able to speak about these experiences or preferences or habits and then having the repetition in these like training programs you have for men.
And hearing others too.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I feel like that's already so expansive, like the fact that your podcast has these men and they're able to share anonymously to just protect themselves and protect other people maybe in their lives. But I mean, to hear those experiences and to share them openly and have that be on repeat, you're in this training ground for creating these new neural pathways. It's like if you are kind of feeling stuck in your own expression of sexuality and how you relate to maybe your self pleasure or even with another, how how do you how do you want to maybe create a new groove and then strengthen that new groove and pathway
Mm.
for that full body expansive, maybe more esoteric versus more animalistic or, because none of them again are bad per se.
Mm-hmm.
All of
Mm-hmm.
them have great flavor to them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you maybe get stuck in one flavor out of the 31, let's just say,
Yeah.
yeah, it can then maybe hopefully be exciting and more of an opportunity versus you feel limited and pigeonholed.
Well, and I've never tied this thread together before, but you know how it's talked about that women like a slower entry or a more foreplay, or like there's
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
there's there's creating intimacy before we're just in the bedroom taking our pants off. And I think this speaks to what we've lost, especially as men,
Mm.
is like a life that arouses us, a
Mm.
life that turns us on. And this is one of the things that has become woven together, is this very limited perspective of what sexuality is.
Mhm.
Sexuality is when one person gets with another person and they do this with their genitals and whatever else. It's like sexuality, in the same way as like how it branches into creative expression, the potential I see is like I have electricity shooting up my spine and the hair standing up on my arms and legs multiple times throughout the day. I feel the sun on my skin and I'm just like, whoa, what is that? I'm just interacting with people. I'm interacting with a woman. I find her beautiful and I feel vibrant and alive and just like turned on from the experience. It doesn't mean I need to go do anything with her.
Mm.
It's, I think that's what a huge piece of what I see in men today is, that disconnect from arousal being a vibrancy of life outside of yanking on their body part.
Mm. Do you think that, or how much do you think that is tied to this kind of epidemic that's happening within men's health and these depressions that a lot of men are
Huge,
in?
huge.
Like, what, I mean, chicken or the egg, I guess, but I see that relationship pretty clearly as you state it like that. Like the disconnection that men have to the life that they want to live, and then that plays out. I mean, it's like how you do one thing is how you do everything, right?
Totally. Well, it's this world. We're really in this world right now where capitalism and making money has really learned how to cash in on how chemistry works inside of us. And the big thing that we're really facing is how instantly rewarded we are.
Mm.
Like the fact that I can go on, a website and have anything at my house, like anything at my house in 2 days is crazy. And then I can go on the internet and I can see anything imaginable. And then you mix that with the chemistry and what happens when we orgasm. It's just like these hits of, whether you look at dopamine or whatever it is that we look at, it's just these instant hits. And we're just stuck in that I need the next hit thing. And I think
Mm.
that's where a lot of men are stuck with sexuality, is like, I need that next hit. I need my drugs. I'm not going to be okay.
Totally. And that's I feel like a level of cultural conditioning too.
Totally.
There's a lot to unwind there. So, okay, you did mention earlier, like in social media, when you're talking about or you're looking at like men's coaches in the sexuality space, they're talking about retention and yeah, like you named like a couple of things, the tricks and whatnot to maybe get her to come or something like that. What do you see is like the actual work, maybe besides what we talked about, mother wound, or like looking at all these other maybe more
Totally.
spiritual, energetic things,
Totally.
but is
Totally.
there a physical practice that men can,
Oh, yeah.
and besides talking about it too?
I think it's so funny. I was just laughing yesterday. I was like, I can't believe I'm teaching this. Like, I can't believe I'm here having these conversations. Like, I'm literally working with men to pleasure themselves and like move beyond the rigidity of mechanical masturbation. I'm like, how did I get here?
Wait,
And
I love this because I'm already envisioning what what I do inside vaginal alchemy, which is not necessarily self-pleasure, but can it be pleasure? Yes, it's not, they're not separated, but tell me what you're talking about, because I feel like you're talking about a version of maybe mapping and getting to know your anatomy
So
and tracking sensation.
curiosity is just the word that comes to me so often. And once again, it pairs with awareness, but it's like, I think the biggest thing that men can do, I think semen retention is really powerful. In the way that it matters to me is bringing choice into when I orgasm.
Mm,
Something happens really powerful there. Where it goes too far is this whole machismo thing. And like, I'm going to hold my semen in forever. And I'm just going to be like this,
yeah,
this godly lover. And it's
that's a
that,
distorted version of it for
it's
sure.
that insecure little boy. If I perform good enough, I'm going to be loved. I'm going to be safe. I'm going to be valued. But there is something really potent about bringing awareness to ejaculation. I think it's a really important first step because
Mm,
what I think men don't do enough of is make time for pleasure without ejaculation.
mm,
I think that's a huge first step. And facing, you've seen the guys on the dance floor that are like super rigid. They don't have any movement in their hips. That's kind of like what we're facing in our relationship to sexuality. And
mm,
I actually learned a lot from being in containers with women and seeing how they related to their self pleasure. I witnessed a lot of that taught me and brought me into my own practices, which is like, how do I expand in feeling pleasure outside of orgasm? How do I not only prolong it, but how do I grow it in all areas? Like I'm feeling energy shoot up my shins right now. I'm feeling electricity standing the hairs up on my legs because of this work that I've done. I'm resensitizing myself to life.
mm,
And whether you call it an edging practice, like some people call it an edging practice, but once again, that gets that performative, like I can last and be a superhero in the bed kind of thing. But all of these things are important techniques if looked at in a certain way, which is like waking ourselves up again to arousal. A big thing that men have to face is this whole I need to be rock hard all the time and at full mast, and that's the only time I'm going to feel pleasure. That's another mind thing that we have to face as men is like, dude, you
mm.
can feel a lot of pleasure and not be fully aroused in that way. Can you explore feeling arousal in that world where you're not all the way hard or maybe you're fully soft? Like, if you can't find pleasure there, then you're dependent upon always being hard. And then you're going to be susceptible to having to take those pills because your mind thinks pleasure only comes when you're fully hard.
Or that's when I'm only accepted, and that's only when, and then the woman can distort that and be like, "Oh, he's not attracted to me because he's not hard. He has no access to his
Totally.
pleasure when he's soft or mid."
And if we're in that yang masculine energy and we're leading in feeling confident in our own bodies when we're not like all the way hard all the time, for one, we're going to ease some of that pressure that's felt. We're going to relax ourselves. The worst thing you can do to having a stiffer erection is have anxiety and stress. And that's what most men face today.
Mm.
Build that with yourself. Build that in your own practice where it's like, yeah, okay, wow, this feels really good. And I'm not doing the normal things that I equate to that peak experience, that crotch sneeze, that one quick thing. Like, oh, let me feel it when I wake up in the morning and I just like roll on the sheet a certain way. And I'm like, oh, what's that? Like, yeah, that feels good. And expanding the boundaries of what the mind has encapsulated as pleasurable.
Totally. Do you think redefining actual sex has to happen as well for the men? Because
100%.
I have to have it happen for the women too.
100%. I think it's, this mind is so strong, and it dictates the way we perceive reality and act within it. And we got to shatter the walls of that. And I mean, we are facing thousands of years of insanity programming around what sexuality is. Insanity, what some of these religions say. Pure insanity. And that is, if that isn't in our experience, it was probably in our moms or our dads or their moms or their dads. And it's in the collective consciousness. Like, it's there, it's palpable. I can straight up feel it in people and in the world. And not only religious perspectives, it's like there's so many dimensions of distortion of what it is. And once again, this is part of committing to it, making it important. That's one of the biggest struggles I see, is people understanding the importance of it and committing to doing something about it. But then, like, their relationships are terrible. They're like, they have sex addiction, they have drug and alcohol addiction, like so many ways to soothe that void. It's all the same void that can be faced by looking at our relationship to sexuality. And a huge piece of it is seeing what stories I have, what are my beliefs. And hey, let's put this out on the podcast now, because I do this in other areas. It's like, sit down with a piece of paper for 10 minutes and just write sex is over and over and over and over, and let your mind just spit things out. Like, just write out whatever your mind comes up with. Sex is this, sex is this, sex is this, sex is this. And you'll take stock pretty quick of some of the interesting beliefs that you have about it.
Yeah. Oh my God, I almost see it being a really interesting partner exercise to do, is write that out side by side for 10 minutes and
Dang.
then share it with each other and notice where there's overlap or complete disconnect, and then having discussion about it. Oh my God.
And I would say that probably often we would have similar distortions about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Because I feel like sometimes too, why you are in the relationship is for that mirrored maybe similarity, or maybe there's a stark difference. I don't know. But maybe it's the reason some people are so attracted to each other too.
For sure. For sure.
Whole other podcast.
For sure. I mean, yeah. Yeah, we attract those similar unconscious kinks for sure.
100%. Okay. Oh my gosh. You just hit so many things. And I think as well, a lot of tangible. I mean, this is just one example of the tangible things that someone can do if they, I mean, for whatever reason, the question, like, so what? Like, so what about men's sexuality? Like, why does this even matter? But I
Mm.
think kind of the same reason as women's sexuality really matters. Like, our
You want me to?
vibrancy.
I would love to answer that.
Please do. Please do.
The When we look at the state of the world, a lot of it has been built, like the buildings, the streets, the way things are, like a lot of it has been built, whether it's from men or masculine mind perspective. That's like what's led in like the material world that we see today. And if we look at the state of societies, so much of it is on a foundation of that needy little boy. I need more, 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 more. Am I enough? Am I enough? And this is one of the most direct paths, is men looking at this relationship with sexuality, with intimacy, with coming together, because everything in this realm is a relationship. Everything. When we're in a realm of duality and separation, I can't drink the water bottle unless it's separate from me. And so in this world of separation, where we feel a lot of suffering from separation, and we came from our mother's womb where we were one, we all experienced it. There's this continual hungry ghost that's like, I'm empty. I don't feel whole. I need this thing. I need to drink this. I need to wear this. I need this partner. I need this house. I need this car. And it will never be filled. There will never be enough. There will never be enough zeros in the bank account to fulfill. There will never be enough sexual partners to feel satisfied. There will never be, a polyamorous group with 10, 20, 100. It will never satiate. And whatever gender or sex a person has, we've all been raised for a long time within the collective consciousness that experiences the world this way, trying to fill that void through external attaining. And so I think the women doing their own work in this world, the men doing their own work in this world, is going to, my opinion, is going to ripple out into what humanity looks like faster than anything else, because it's not about the outside. It's about what's happening in each of us and how we project that and create that in the world. So I think it's the foundation of creation.
100% agree. I couldn't agree more. And I feel like with the people doing their own work, it's, coming on to whether that is just relationship, continual relating in the workplace, in the home, in, all different formats of relating and relationships. Like living your life is going to be the training ground. And I don't want to say optimization. That's not the right word, but do you know what I mean? I'm like, that's masculine. That's but it's just the connection. It's the connecting, the it'll be the thing that fills that void, I think, when we can do that really well from a place of like, we are already full. We are already whole and satiated within ourselves. I don't know how
And
I'll say this.
what a beautiful way to learn, practice, remember, which is expanding the boundaries of pleasure with ourselves and diving into the things that we discover, continually liberating, expanding, feeling more pleasure, feeling more alive, feeling more vibrant.
And
People,
sharing that openly, without secrecy, without all the shame.
I'm here for it.
I'm here for that too. I feel like that's a good place to put a pin in it. Because you
Mm-hmm.
know what? We did, we touched on so many amazing topics, and I wish this podcast could be like a Joe Rogan, Stephen Bartlett thing where we could keep going for 2 to 3 hours. Because I think there are so many other aspects of what you do, or maybe what we could just riff
Yeah.
on.
Well, and I think that's the beauty of it's this beautiful bridging the gap right now,
Mhm.
because oh my gosh, I've grown so much listening to women and their journeys with pleasure and their journeys with sexuality and what they're experiencing in relationship. It's it's what it's what I see taking place is the next chapter, is this kind of hearing from one another, growing in separate containers and coming together and hearing from one another, and ultimately, yeah, it's creating a better life that we get to enjoy more of on our own and when we come together. So I'm so grateful to be here. And maybe there's different pieces in the podcast that people can comment and they're like, I want to go further into this one. And we can tease that apart.
Absolutely. Everyone who's listening, if there was a certain point that you were like, that is what I want to hear more about, please let us both know and put that in the comments wherever you listen. Um, Ean, thank you so much for being here. And I will put all of your access points, social media, website, all the things in the show notes. So if you're listening again, please check out Ean Wood. Ian is spelled differently, Eain, or sorry,
EAN.
Ean. Sorry, I was
EN.
saying that's like literally how I with my name. Oh my gosh, I feel like people always add an A. I'm like, no A, but you're like, no I. Ean. Ean
Yeah.
Wood. Uh,
Yes. Thank
okay.
you so much for having me. And thank you, anybody that's listened to the whole podcast and is curious and that you're doing this own work in your life and this discovery. I don't even like the word work anymore. This discovery, this exploration. And especially if you're a man, you've listened to the end, kudos. You're needed in this world. You're so important. Please uh, uh, keep going, keep strengthening, keep stepping into your power, and you will be a leader by example.
100%. Thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you next time.